Part 31. Michael was just outside in the hallway, probably with Martin too, but I felt a panic creep over me. I suddenly felt very vulnerable, but I sucked it up, lifted my chin defiantly, even though there was no one here to see it, and I rolled over. I didn't get much sleep. Every little sound made me tense up. I laid there surveying the darkness with my eyes and glanced at the light under the cameras, thinking they would blink back on when they thought I wasn't looking. They better not turn them back on, part of me snapped. Then another part got even more irritated that they didn't come back on. What in the world was wrong with me? At 5 p.m. I finally got up. It was still early, but I couldn't lay there anymore. I snatched my clothes and stormed into the bathroom. Not knowing why I was mad only seemed to tick me off more. I slammed my clothes into the hamper and actually glared at them. Then I growled because I couldn't understand why I was in such a foul mood. I was usually in a good mood. This wasn't like me. That frustrated me even more, and I stomped back out into my room. It was empty. So much for Jonathan coming when I woke up, I mumbled. Part of me knew there was no way for him to know when I woke up. But he should just know, I huffed. Gads, this was like having split personalities or something. Suddenly a phone rang, and I yelped, then followed the sound to a cell phone laying at my dresser. It hadn't been there when I got my clothes. I snatched it up and looked at the screen. Jonathan's name was there. I looked towards the door, half expecting him to walk in with the phone to his ear. When he didn't, I jabbed the talk button. "Hello?" I snapped. There was a brief pause. "Reina?" Yeah, who else would it be, I thought. "Yes," I was able to say, although in a tight voice. Another short pause, and I sighed and shifted my feet, waiting. "I'm taking a group of people to Beamer's. Your dad, my dad, Aunt Mary, your Aunt Sarah, Brent, and Samantha. Trent is with us, too." My jaw clenched. He left? He left without even coming in to say goodbye? I felt my jaw muscles clenched as I peered at the wall, not seeing it. "Reina?" "What?" I growled, shooting my hard glare to the floor. "I'm coming back right now." My eyes widened then. Crap. I needed to get control over whatever was happening. "No, it's okay, sorry. I'm just grumpy for some reason," I stated, trying to sound a bit more chipper. "I'll be fine." I even attempted to chuckle as I ran my free hand through my hair. "I just thought I would give you some time," he whispered. Obviously, the others were close enough to hear. I smiled, and the anger inside of me calmed a bit. "Thanks," I replied back sincerely. "So, Alyssa wanted to stay behind. I tried to get her to come." He kept his voice so low it took both my werewolf and vampire ears to pick up his words. "Oh, oh," I stated, realizing a part of his plan had backfired on him and he was warning me. I glanced towards the door. "Yeah, but I talked to Track and he's on his way over." I smiled. He was trying to save me. Then the irritation crept up again. Wow, I was having some serious issues. "I'll be fine," I said calmly. If I worried him any more, he really would turn all those people around and come back. I had to show him I was okay, and not a baby, or worse, a freak that couldn't be left alone. "Paige has a workout planned for you too," he stated. Great, he found me 2 babysitters. "I'll be fine, Jonathan. I appreciate you trying to give me some quiet time and saving me from the relatives," I chuckled, to make sure he knew I was being playful. "I'm sorry you sacrificed yourself for it, though." He chuckled, sounding a bit more relieved. "Well, I do what I can. Listen, I know you're very capable. Well, hang on." I heard him talk to someone and then he sighed. "Reina, my Aunt Mary wants to say hello." "Sorry," he whispered the last part. I smiled. "It's okay." There was a rumbling, and then, "Hello, dear." I had to pull the phone away from my ear, but I smiled. "Hello, Aunt Mary. I'm so excited to see the party preparations, but I wanted to have my hairdresser look you over and have us discuss your hair." "I'm sure we can do that when you get back," I chuckled. She did make me smile. "Good. As soon as I get back, then." "Okay," I nodded. Then Jonathan took the phone back. "It should only take a few hours once we get there," he stated. I heard himself doubting his chivalrous plan. "We're almost there now." That meant they had taken a closed car. "Well then, I better make the most of my freedom," I chuckled. Just then there was a quick knock and the door opened. Track and Jackson walked in. "Is someone there?" "Yeah, the babysitters," I snarled, and then made myself laugh to lighten the mood. "They're not." "I know. I was just kidding," I smiled to make my voice lighter. "Okay, you call me if you need anything. I'm number 3 on your speed dial. Your dad is number 2. And number 1 is for voicemail," I recited playfully. He chuckled. "I'll get you into the world of high tech yet." I nodded, looking at the two that were standing there waiting. "I love you," he stated, and that did make me smile. "I love you too," I said, although I turned around and lowered my voice a little. "I'll call you when we're heading back." "Perfect. That will give us time to clean up the party before Dad gets back," I smiled. He chuckled again. We said goodbye, and then I pushed the button. "So, you two on babysitting duty?" I snapped. Track's eyes narrowed, and Jackson shook his head. "I'm just here for a rematch in the pool." "Right," I rolled my eyes. There was another knock on the door, and then the doctor came in, his little plastic caddy in his hand. "No," I stated when he headed towards me. He stopped, and I nodded. "Yes." I said no. The doctor turned and looked at Track, then back at Michael, who was standing just inside the room now. "You don't have to look at them." I said no. "No exam. No." "But I have to get—" "What part of no don't you understand?" I snapped, clenching one hand in a tight fist. The doctor's eyes widened and Track walked towards me, watching me carefully. "Don't patronize me, Track," I hissed. "I'm tired of being prodded and poked. Missing one exam isn't going to make them lose out on the discovery of a lifetime that they keep hoping for. I said no exam." The doctor looked at Track and my hackles went up. Jackson and Track could sense it, and they both eyed me, but I kept mine on the white coat. "Don't look at him for some sort of instruction. I'm Reina Beldrin. It's my body, and I said no exam." I shouted the last part, and Michael stepped up, but he was glaring at the doctor. The man frowned, nodded, and left the room, but I saw him pulling out his cell phone as he went. I smiled triumphantly and gave myself a little shake. "Okay, so let's hit the pool so I can whip you both at water ball." I was bouncing a little when we left, and I ignored the look they both gave me. Paige smiled as she walked up. "Oh, there you are. Ready for your workout?" "No," I stated, not slowing. "I'm going to play water ball. No workout today." And I kept walking. I didn't hear her footsteps for a few minutes, but I didn't care. I had something pumping through me, and I kinda liked it. I was determined to show them I was strong, could take care of myself, and I was also old enough and intelligent enough to make my own choices. Track looked at me and I winked at him. "Ready to get your butt kicked?" He nodded, frowning a little. I ignored it and kept walking. Alyssa appeared at the door to the pool and my stance changed. My hackles went up. I leaned forward a little and my steps became softer. I was stalking her. My eyes locked on hers and she smiled. "There you are." She walked over in her bouncy step. "Everyone has left, and I was worried I would be stuck wandering around all alone." "Well, we can't have that," I replied. The smile on my face was strange, but she didn't seem to notice. "Oh, good," she smiled back, then shot Jackson a look. "So, what are we going to do?" She blinked her eyes too many times at him, and he quickly looked at me. Alyssa's smile dropped just a little, but she squared her shoulders and nodded. "Well, since you're all here, I'm guessing we're playing in the pool." I nodded, my eyes tighter and my smile wider. I had my prey in my sights, and the excitement was rushing through me. My pulse and my heartbeat were keeping time as well, and I was still on two legs. "Water ball," Track added, his voice tight. "Oh, I love water balls," she exclaimed, and I laughed, walking past her through the door. I chuckled to myself as I marched over to my changing room. When I closed the door, I moved to the closet that held the suits. I ignored my usual ones and started looking through the others. I pulled out a hanger with a hot pink two-piece hanging off of it. I frowned. Okay, I wasn't that brave. I hung it back up and kept looking. Finally, I found one, undressed and slipped it on. It was a deep blue one-piece, cut low on the front and the back, and high on the sides. It had ties on the sides, showing the skin underneath. I twisted and turned in front of the mirror, then smiled and nodded. This time, I put my hair in a ponytail, and then braided it and put a tie on the end. Another quick inspection, I opened the door and stepped out. The three of them were waiting just outside. Track's eyes widened, and Jackson smiled and whistled softly. Suddenly I wanted to run back in and put my other suit on. Then I looked at Alyssa. She wore a blue and pink polka-dotted bikini. Her hair was up in a pretty soft bun, and I wondered if I should have opted for that two-piece after all. "Ready to play some ball?" I asked, my voice soft but with a challenge to it. Jackson's head bobbed slowly, his eyes still taking me in, and Track shot him a hard look. Alyssa smiled, but I felt her inspecting me too. Sizing me up, I thought to myself, and turned, heading towards the pool. The hoop was already set up. I lifted my arms and dove in. Alyssa hurried over to the stairs, and I was bouncing the ball in my hand when she walked over to us. "So, whose team am I on?" she smiled, looking at the guys. "Mine," I stated, and Track looked at me, his eyes worried. I winked at him and turned to her. I tossed her the ball and grinned. "Let's go." The guys creamed us the first game. Alyssa pouted afterwards. "I'm not very good, sorry." She waited for sympathy, but the guys were terrified now. They looked at me and I turned. "It's okay, you're trying." I tossed her the ball and we played again. She wasn't as giggly this time, and she started to pout more. By the end of the third game, she seemed a bit irritated. Oh, poor thing. I hadn't said anything mean. In fact, I was being supportive and gave her tips as we played. But she couldn't get the attention or reaction she wanted from the guys, and it was eating at her. Michael walked up to the side of the pool, and I smiled. "Want to play?" "Not likely," he chuckled, and held up his phone. "It's your father." I nodded, hiding my fear, and waded over to the side of the pool. I pushed myself up and took the towel he held out in his hand. I dried my hands off and took the phone without covering myself with it. "Hi, Dad," I said, turning my back to the pool and put one hand on my hip. I heard Alyssa's voice perk up and knew she was moving in on them. "Hello, sweetheart. How's everything going?" "Great. Who called him?" I shot Michael a hard glare, but he ignored it. "Great," I beamed. My heart was pounding as the adrenaline was starting to rush through me. "I got a call from the doctor. He said you refused your exam." "It's just one exam, Dad. They can poke away later," I said lightheartedly. "And you refused your workout?" he stated quietly. Paige tattled? That miffed me a bit. "I'm in the pool, playing water ball, Dad. That's plenty of exercise." There was one of those dad pauses, and I was glad I couldn't see his face. So, how's the party planning going? I put in, shifting on my feet. Fine. Reina, should I worry? Yeah, probably, I thought. Something was wrong, and I didn't know what. There was no way I was going to tell him that. I chuckled. You worry too much, Daddy. Yeah, I pulled the daddy trick. I just want to feel normal today. I even put in a little plea with a dash of pouting in my voice. Wow, had I always known how to do this? I understand, sweetheart, and you're right. You deserve that after all you've been through. My eyes widened. It worked. Maybe there was something to this after all. Thanks, Dad. I'm glad you understand. A small trace of guilt moved through me, but I pushed it away. I wanted to find out the kind of power that females like Alyssa had. If I were going to beat her, I had to claim her power and conquer it. I shook my head. What was I thinking? I hated this kind of stuff. But it raged back up in me, and I smiled. I'm being good, I continued. Track and Jackson are here, and I'm being a good hostess for Alyssa. Another pause. Okay, sweetheart, we'll be heading back in just a few minutes. They have everything under control here. Take your time, I laughed, my ears focused on the sounds behind me. Would that have anything to do with all the relatives we've taken away from you? What? Never, I laughed with playful sarcasm. He laughed back, then told me to give Michael the phone. I handed it to him, winked, and then turned back to the pool. I stopped for a second. Track and Jackson were standing against the far side of the pool with wide eyes. Alyssa was standing in front of them. She was close, too close. Up went my hackles. I saw the worried look in the guy's eyes, like two cornered animals. I walked to my side of the pool and then jumped. I tucked my legs up, wrapped my arms around them, and came down in a hard cannonball. When I pushed back up and out, Alyssa was freaking out about her hair. I smiled. Okay, ready for another game? Then she turned, and for a split second, I saw anger flash across her eyes. Yeah, she knew I knew. Now, it was on. I wiggled my brows and swam over to them, where the water was only waist deep. I stood up and looked around. Now where's that ball? By the end of the next game, Alyssa was as soaked as the rest of us. Could I help it if I liked to slam the ball? For some reason, her makeup stayed on, though. I didn't understand that part, but I was happy enough with the other results. Just then, Track and Jackson turned. In walked Rock with Missy and Miles. I smiled and headed to the edge of the pool. I pulled myself out slowly, showing my strength. I found it odd that I wanted Alyssa to see that, but I jumped up, grabbed a towel, and headed over, smiling. Rock looked at the pool and then watched me approach. He noticed my suit and me in my suit. Then he glanced at the pool and back at me again. His eyes narrowed a bit, and I winked at him. His brows went up high this time, and I turned my attention to the other two. It's about time you two visited, I chirped, and then looked down at myself. I would hug you, but I don't want to get you all wet. Missy smiled. She was about 3 inches shorter than me, had dirty blonde hair that was always shiny and straight, and looked very good on her. Her brown eyes sparkled, and her smile was real. So who's winning? She asked. I laughed. I am. Miles shook his head. I think we should have come sooner, he replied playfully. Missy looked towards the water, and I saw her eyes narrow a bit. Good. She felt it too. Miles looked at her and she shrugged. It's pretty strong. I frowned. What is? Missy looked at the guys and then stepped closer to me. You know how we can smell the musk on the guys? I nodded and she shrugged. Oh, I whispered. Females musk too? Sort of, she whispered. Not for the same reasons, but when our territory is threatened. She moved her eyes towards the guys, but kept her head facing me. We square off, or top, and there is a scent to that. Ah, I whispered. That explained a lot. Does she have the same scent? I asked, and Missy shook her head. No, she's all vampire, but her body language screams it. Good. It wasn't just me losing my mind. I turned and saw the three of them climbing out of the pool. Alyssa pretended to be having a hard time pushing out, and she called out to Jackson. He frowned, his eyes darting to me, and I laughed. Finally he sighed when she called again and turned. He yanked her out of the pool, and she landed hard. He let go of her hand quickly and trotted over to us. Missy giggled. I see the guys have caught on. I shrugged and leaned forward. I think part of that is because she saw Track and I as wolves and thought we were cute, dumb dogs. Missy's brows went up and Miles frowned. I nodded and she shook her head. When I turned as they walked up, Missy stepped up, standing just behind my shoulder. All the pack. She was showing her support and also showing the enemy that I had backup. I wonder if that was what the guys had hoped by bringing Missy here. Based on Track's face, I didn't think so. He was watching the two of us and frowning. Alyssa smiled. Hello, I'm Alyssa, Reina's cousin. Miles simply nodded, standing directly next to Missy. Her eyes moved over us, and I guess we did look a little odd in our stance. She smiled at Rock, though, and winked. You, I remember, she stated, turning one shoulder, her voice dropping just a bit. He cleared his throat and mumbled a hello. She blinked and then smiled wide. Are you all coming in the pool? I think she hoped there would be too many for Waterball now. She was right, but that wasn't the point. Actually, we have some track business, Track stated. Some pack business, Track stated, moving up next to me. I wonder if he knew that he just put her alone facing all of us. Oh, she said sadly. Well, I guess I could find something to do. Do all of you have to go? She looked up at Rock hopefully. Come on, guys, I smiled. We can't leave my cousin alone. I have to play hostess. I felt Track's hard stare. If he pulled rank, I was toast. But for now, he wasn't. Alyssa smiled. Oh, good. I wish we could all go somewhere, but... She gave me a sad smile. But we understand. My fist tightened and Track reached out and took my hand, forcing me to open it. Okay then, how about we all go watch a movie? He was trying to find something low-key to keep things calm. How about the game room, I said, and I saw Missy stand up a bit taller. Oh yeah, I was glad that she was here. She was the only one besides Alyssa that understood this game. Alyssa nodded. That sounds like fun. I turned and flinched when Rock stared down at me. I outranked him, but he had that big brother look that said he wasn't above tossing me over his shoulder if needed. Missy threaded her arm through mine, and I turned to her, smiling. You have got to come visit me more often. She nodded. So it seems. We both leaned into each other and giggled. Pack was pack. Even if she and I hadn't liked each other, we would have united in front of a common enemy. But I liked her. We didn't get to spend a lot of time together. Female werewolves were kept close to home until they mated. She was also much lower in the pecking order than I was, so she tended to be quiet and stay off to the side and watch for the most part. Track's phone rang and he pulled it out. He let go of my hand and stopped, looking at me and pointing towards the changing room. I nodded, let go of Missy, and headed off to change. When we were all clean and dry, we headed out of the pool room. We turned and headed down the hallway. Michael's watch beeped and I growled. Missy looked at me and I whispered in her ear. She nodded and stopped. Um, Reina, could you show me where the bathroom is? I nodded. Sure. You guys go ahead. We'll be right there. We had full service bathrooms here since we had plenty of non vampires that worked and visited here, but I smiled at her. When they turned the corner, Michael checked the readout on my thermos and then handed it to me. Missy had seen me eat before, but she chatted with Michael while I drank it down. I handed him the empty container and we continued on to the game room. Miles and Rock were on the motorcycle. Jackson was talking on his cell phone, and Alyssa was cheering the racers on. I heard a soft growl come from Missy as she eyed the female standing next to her mate. Track walked in behind us and stopped, towering over us. We felt his dominance, and we both lowered our eyes a little. He put a hand on each of our shoulders and leaned forward. Play nice, he whispered, and we nodded. Then he kissed us both on the back of the head and walked off as Jackson waved him over. Missy and I exchanged looks. Okay, so we play nice, I winked, and she smiled. We walked over to the cycles and stood on each side of Alyssa. Miles saw our reflection in the game screen on his on-screen cycle, and his on-screen cycle slammed into a brick wall. Oh no, Alyssa gasped, and he quickly tried to right his bike. My cousin took a step closer to the bike, pretending to be looking at the screen. Missy growled low, and Miles jumped off the bike mid-game from the other side. He bumped into Rock, who almost fell off his bike. Hey man, watch it, he laughed, and then turned and looked at us three females. His eyes widened, but he stayed on his bike, ignoring the loud beeping from the game. Alyssa smiled at him and climbed on the abandoned bike. Will you show me how to play? Sure, he almost yelped, looking up at me. I winked, and he shook his head, looking at Miles, who was walking over to where Track and Jackson were talking. She wiggled on the seat. I hope I don't fall off, she giggled. I leaned forward. Just squeeze with your thighs and focus, I said in a low voice that was dripping with a hidden threat. She turned and looked at me. Now her eyes were wide. I winked, and she nodded slowly. Then Missy and I turned, leaving poor Rock on the bikes with her. The guys were in their huddles, so we moved over to where the arcade games were. We both played pinball on machines next to each other. We laughed and joked as we did. Yeah, she-bonding, if there had to be a name for it. Alyssa laughed louder than she probably needed to. Missy and I stiffened, but we didn't turn around. That would have meant we were worried, and we weren't going to look worried. Missy laughed and pointed out something on her board. I knew there really wasn't anything there, but I laughed back. We both jumped a bit when Track was suddenly behind us, standing between our machines. He looked down at each of them. Yeah, we sucked, but we weren't really paying attention. He shook his head and we looked up at him. I'm just glad we're on the same side, he chuckled, and Missy and I grinned at each other. Track challenged me to air hockey, and Miles, Missy, and Jackson stood and watched. I beat him bad. Miles stepped up next, and Missy grinned as I creamed him too. Jackson beat me, and that ticked me off, though it shouldn't have. Missy and I refused to play each other. We were facing a common enemy, and we would not compete against each other right now, period. Rock and Alyssa stepped up, and I looked at her. Want to play? Okay. Sure. How do you play? She asked innocently. But as soon as we started, we all knew she knew how to play. It got intense, and the smiles slipped off everyone's face. I leaned over the table and hit a puck with all I had. It crashed into her side of the table and shattered. She gasped and covered her face. I blinked. Wow, those were made out of special plastic that was meant to take our strength. Track took my arm. Okay, let's find something else to do. I didn't mean to do that, I whispered. He nodded, not smiling. I bit my lower lip. Okay, maybe this was getting a bit out of hand. If she would just back down, admit my dominance, this would all go away. But her body language screamed the challenge, and my wolf couldn't let go of it. Where are we going? I asked as he slipped his hand down into mine. He turned to the others. How about a movie? The guys quickly said yes. Alyssa joined them, and Missy and I gave each other the rolling the eyes without rolling them look. Alyssa bounced into the room. Great. Now she was on my private territory. She waltzed over and plopped her butt on my couch. I stopped and my body stiffened. Track stopped next to me, leaning over so his arm touched mine. There was a low growl from him, and I lowered my eyes. Fine, I screamed mentally. Missy and Miles sat in one of the large recliners. Her eyes met mine as if to say, one move and I'm at your side. I gave her a small nod and headed towards the couch. Track pulled me back and then walked to a closet. He pulled out a huge beanbag chair and drug it over. He plopped it on the floor in front of the couch and then plopped me in it. He and Rock jumped on either side with me, making it push up under me. Jackson nearly dove into the other chair. I smiled. Alyssa had the whole couch to herself, and I could feel her glaring behind me. So, I smiled, who's going to pick the movie? I heard Missy chuckle, and I turned and grinned at her. Track gave me a look, and I turned and faced the dark TV screen. Gads, I felt like a little kid. He stood up and walked to the panel, sliding it open. Alyssa was up and to him before I noticed it. She leaned close to him, her tight jeans giving us all a show. Rock turned to me. I'm wearing a suit to the party, he said. I knew he was trying to distract me, but I chuckled. Yeah, well, I have to get dressed up too. You want to wear my suit? He laughed. I shrugged. Sure, if you wear my dress. He shoved my shoulder and I fell over, smiling. Rock flopped on the other side of the massive beanbag, and the impact tossed me up a little bit. Jackson laughed, lifted up, and slammed himself down hard. I fell over backwards, my legs in the air. They quickly pulled me back upright, and I was flipping my hair out of my face when I looked up. Track was looking through the movies, and she reached over and put her hand on his shoulder, leaning towards him as she pretended to look too. I was half launched when Rock and Jackson tackled me. We all went off the back of the chair and landed with a hard thump. Missy was kneeling over me, and Rock growled at her. She lowered her eyes but looked right at me. I was spittin' mad. I shoved both the guys off me and tried to sit up. Jackson slammed me back down, leaning over me. Chill, he whispered, and my lip curled. I saw the internal struggle. I outranked him, but he thought he was keeping me from doing something really stupid. That was probably true, but I wasn't thinking about that right now. We found a movie, came Melissa's voice, and we all turned and looked up at her. Jackson was still laying halfway over me, and Rock had his legs over mine. She frowned a bit, and I smiled. One of the perks of a pack. I winked, and I swear she looked even more jealous. That's where I'm going to stop there.